This is a story you'll definitely want to hear to the very end. Chapter 1. The Silence After the Scream. The house is silent. This isn't the peaceful quiet of early morning when the world is still asleep. This is the heavy, viscous, dusty silence of a corpse. Dust is my only constant companion. It lies like a thin shroud on the polished surface of the grand piano, untouched for 3 years. It silvers the picture frames on the mantelpiece, turning smiling faces into ghostly masks. The faces of my family. The family I turned into a handful of ash and bitter memories with my own hands. You ask how I, Alex, ended up like this. How a 25-year-old man, the sole heir, a graduate of a prestigious university, became a willing recluse in a huge suburban house that once buzzed with laughter and life. I am here to confess. Not for forgiveness, I neither deserve nor seek it. I am here so that this poison, eating me from the inside, might stop burning, if only for a moment. Just 5 years ago, the picture was different, pastoral, almost obscenely perfect. Our home was the epicenter of the universe for all our friends and relatives. My father, Dr. Samuel Peterson, was a man of rock. A respected surgeon with a national reputation, a velvet baritone voice, and unshakable self-confidence. He was my idol, my guide, the sun around which our entire system revolved. My mother, Helen, was his faithful planet. Quiet, incredibly beautiful even in her 50s, she created comfort with her very presence. Her pies were legendary, and her garden was a work of art. And my younger sister, Anna. A firecracker, not a girl. Sharp-tongued, always teasing me, but ready to tear out the throat of anyone who looked at me sideways. We were the model. The very family from a mayonnaise commercial that makes cynics grind their teeth. Sunday lunches on the veranda, boisterous birthday celebrations when the house seemed to creak at the seams with guests. Evening talks with my father in his study over a game of chess, where, making another move, he would share his wisdom. He taught me honesty. The truth, Alex, he would say, moving his queen, is the most solid foundation, even if it's bitter. You can't build anything strong on a lie. How ironic that I turned his very words into a weapon of mass destruction. Now I wander through these rooms like a ghost in my own tomb. Here is my mother's living room, where the velvet curtains have faded from the sun because there is no one to draw them. Here is Anna's room, frozen in time, an open textbook on the desk, a sweater tossed on the bed. As if she just stepped out for a minute and will be right back. But she won't be back, ever. I slammed that door shut myself. And here is my father's study, the scent of his cologne, mixed with the smell of old books and leather, still hangs in the air. I sit in his massive armchair. It creaks under my weight, as if complaining, as if it remembers another, more worthy master. On the desk, the silver-framed photograph still stands, the four of us against the mountain backdrop, happy, sun-tanned, unaware that one of us was already sharpening a knife for everyone's back. I look at my reflection in the dark monitor screen. A thin, gaunt face, eyes holding nothing but exhaustion. I got what I wanted. I brought the truth, as I saw it then, into this house. I tore off the veils, exposed the skeletons in the closet. But I failed to consider one thing. Sometimes a facade isn't a lie, but a load-bearing wall. And by destroying it, I brought the entire building down on the heads of those I thought I loved. The silence that surrounds me isn't peace. It is the deafening, unceasing scream of everything I have destroyed. And it screams only inside my head.
Chapter 2. The Worm in the Apple. It didn't start with a thunderclap on a clear day, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible wormhole. I was 20, filled with that repulsive youthful maximalism that forces you to see the world in stark black and white. My father was the embodiment of white for me, an absolute, untarnished light, but subconsciously, it seems, I was looking for a flaw in him. Perhaps it was simple envy of his integrity, his authority. I wanted to find a crack in him to prove to myself that I was not inferior, that his pedestal was merely an illusion. The push came from a coincidence. I was sorting through all things in the attic, preparing it for renovation. In a far corner, under a pile of yellowed newspapers, I stumbled upon an old wooden box lined with faded velvet. Inside were my mother's youthful relics, a pair of dried roses, a student ID, a few pins, and letters, dozens of letters tied with a satin ribbon. I knew that prying into someone's private correspondence was despicable, but something compelled me to untie the ribbon. Most of the letters were from friends, full of girlish secrets and dreams. But one, without an envelope, written in a hurried male hand on a sheet torn from a notepad, caught my eye. Helen, my angel, don't listen to anyone. We will be together no matter the cost. This friend of yours, Samuel, will never make you happy. He's too proper, too bland. I will steal you away, take you to the ends of the earth. Just wait for me. Yours forever, Victor. The letter wasn't dated, but from the style and paper, it was clear it was decades old.
The name Victor meant nothing to me, but the name Samuel made my heart skip a beat. My father, my mother had someone else? Someone passionate, fiery, ready to steal her away? And my father was bland? This image did not align with the monumental man I knew. I slipped the letter into my pocket. The worm of doubt had been swallowed. I began my secret investigation. I became obsessed. At night, instead of studying for exams, I scoured the internet, trying to find any leads. I questioned distant relatives under the most absurd pretexts, pretending to be creating a family tree. Most remembered nothing or didn't want to talk. But one day, my mother's great-aunt, old and already a bit confused in her memories, let something slip. Oh, our dear Helen! How she suffered before her wedding to Samuel. That fiancé of hers, Victor, handsome as a devil, but a difficult man. Everyone was afraid of him. And then he disappeared. Just vanished, that's all. Thank God. Who knows how it would have ended? And soon after, Samuel proposed to her. He saved her, you could say. Disappeared. The word pierced my brain like a hot nail. I started digging deeper. In the archives of the county newspaper from the late 80s, I found what I was looking for. A tiny article in the crime section. Victor Monroe, 25, of this city, has been reported missing. He was last seen on the evening of May 15th near the city park. Anyone with information is asked to contact. I checked the dates. May 15th. And 3 weeks later, according to the stamp in their passports, my parents were married. The picture began to form, repulsive and frightening in its logic. Victor, passionate and dangerous. My mother, who perhaps wanted to break up with him. And my father, the proper Samuel, who was there. What happened that evening in the park? An argument? A fight? I couldn't believe it. My father, a surgeon whose hand saved lives, could take one? The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when, tormented by insomnia, I went to the kitchen and overheard my parents' hushed conversation from the living room. They thought I was asleep. "Sam, so many years have passed," my mother whispered. "Maybe it's time to stop blaming yourself. You did what you had to do." My father's reply was muffled, but I heard every word. "There are some things, Helen, that never let you go, ever. I see his face every day." In that moment, something inside me broke. All my love and admiration were replaced by an icy contempt. My idol, my moral compass, was a murderer. He didn't save my mother, he just eliminated the competition. Our entire perfect life, our laughter, our Sunday lunches, it was all built on blood and a lie. The foundation was rotten. And I, raised on his own principles about the sanctity of truth, decided it was my duty to detonate this entire structure. I felt no pity. I felt righteous fury. I was not a son, but a judge, delivering a sentence, and I already knew when and how I would carry it out. Chapter 3. The Night of the Execution. The day of execution was set for my father's birthday, his 55th. I chose this date with a cold, sadistic calculation. The higher our family's happiness soared on this day, the more deafening the fall would be. I wanted maximum drama, maximum destruction. I wanted him, surrounded by adoration and honor, to lose it everything in an instant. The house buzzed like a beehive. Everyone had come. Relatives, friends, my father's colleagues. Toasts flowed like a river. Everyone spoke of his kindness, his wisdom, his golden hands. I sat at the table with a stone face and a smile that felt like it would crack at any moment. I drank wine, and it tasted as bitter as bile. Inside me, everything was coiled into a tight, icy knot of anticipation. I was an executioner, waiting for the bell to toll. Finally, late in the evening, after the last guests had departed, the four of us remained in the living room. My father, tired but happy, sat in his favorite armchair. My mother was sorting through gifts, and Anna, laughing, was retelling a funny story about one of the guests. The atmosphere was warm, relaxed, steeped in love. The perfect moment. "Dad," I said, and my voice sounded so loud in the ensuing silence that everyone flinched. "I want to make a toast too. A bit late, but the most important one." My father smiled. "Of course, son. I'm listening." I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and turned to face them. I felt like an actor on a stage before the main monologue of my life. "I want to drink to the truth," I said, raising my glass. "To the truth that lies at the foundation of our family." My mother and Anna looked at me, bewildered. A shadow of anxiety flickered in my father's eyes. "And I also want to remember a man who isn't with us, a man whose disappearance we have to thank for us all being here today. His name was Victor Monroe." The name hung in the air like gunshot smoke. I saw my mother's face turn as white as the tablecloth. She looked at my father in horror. Anna frowned. "Alex, what nonsense are you talking? What Victor?" But I was looking only at my father. His smile had vanished. He gave me a long, heavy look, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for them.
You remember him, don't you, Dad? I asked venomously. The evening of May 15th, the city park. You two had a good talk then, didn't you? So good that after that conversation, no one ever saw him again. Alex, be quiet, right now, my mother screamed, jumping to her feet. Her hands were trembling, but I couldn't be stopped. The poison poured out. Why should I be quiet? I shot back. You've been living a lie for 30 years. You, Mom, married your fiancé's killer. And you, Dad, built your entire flawless reputation, your career, our life, on someone else's bones. You taught me honesty, but you yourself are a cowardly murderer who got rid of a rival and hid the body. Are you insane? Screamed Anna, rushing towards me, trying to snatch the glass from my hand. I pushed her away. The living room descended into chaos. Anna was crying with anger and confusion, yelling that I was a traitor. My mother was sobbing, pressing her hands to her mouth, her pleas of, "Stop, I beg you," drowning in the noise. And my father? He just sat in his armchair, hunched over, as if all the air had been let out of him. He had aged 20 years in those few minutes. He raised a hand, and everyone fell silent. He looked at my mother, and in his gaze was such infinite tenderness and pain that it took my breath away for a second. Then he turned his gaze to me. There was no hatred in it, only a bottomless, all-consuming weariness. "Yes," he said quietly, but each word dropped into the silence like a stone into a well. "I killed him." Anna cried out, as if she'd been struck. My mother sank silently onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. In that moment, I felt like a victor. I had torn off the mask. I had delivered the sentence and heard the confession. I was right. My truth had triumphed. I didn't understand then that this wasn't a triumph of justice. It was an act of vandalism. I hadn't switched on the light of truth. I had thrown a lit match into a powder keg, standing in the middle of my own home. And now, all that was left was to watch it burn.
Chapter 4. The Fall of the House. The explosion happened, and it was followed by nothing but a deafening, all-consuming void. That evening didn't end with screams or fights. It simply died. After my father's confession, a silence so profound fell that you could hear the blood roaring in your ears. Anna looked at him with horror and disgust, as if seeing him for the first time. My mother didn't move, transformed into a pillar of salt. I stood in the middle of the room, drunk on my righteousness and completely unprepared for what came next. My father didn't try to explain anything. He simply stood up, walked over to my mother, knelt before her, and laid his head in her lap. She, without uncovering her face, began to stroke his graying hair. It was their silent dialogue, their farewell, to which neither Anna nor I had access. An hour later, my father called the police himself. The consequences of my triumph of truth came down on us like an avalanche. My father was arrested that same night. I remember two grim-faced men leading him, tall, proud, but utterly broken, out of the house he had built. He didn't look in my direction. His entire gaze was fixed on my mother. That look will haunt me until the end of my days. There was no trial. The next morning, my father was found in his holding cell.
He had hanged himself with his own shirt. He left a short note, just 2 words, "I'm sorry." Who he was asking for forgiveness, I didn't know. My mother? Anna? The man he killed 30 years ago? I certainly wasn't on that list. He had simply erased me from his life and his death. The fall of the house was swift and complete. My mother broke. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just faded. In a matter of weeks, she transformed from a vibrant, full-of-life woman into a silent shadow. She stopped leaving her room, sitting for hours by the window, staring at nothing with unseeing eyes. Doctors diagnosed her with severe depression and reactive psychosis. Our home, once filled with the aroma of her baking, was now filled with the smell of tranquilizers and despair. Her life, in essence, ended the same night as my father's. She just continued to breathe.
Anna became my fury, my personal demon of vengeance. My father's funeral was a nightmare. A handful of the closest people, all looking at me with undisguised contempt. Anna wouldn't let me approach the casket. When I tried to say something, she walked up to me and hissed, quietly but clearly so only I could hear. "You killed him. Not that man in the cell, but you. You came with your truth to his birthday? Here's another truth for you. You were never his equal. You're just an envious, pathetic worm who couldn't stand his greatness. You wanted power, not justice. Well, enjoy it. Now you're the master of this grave. Just know this, you died with him for me. I don't have a brother anymore." Her words were more precise than any scalpel. They cut open my soul and exposed what I was afraid to admit even to myself. Envy, petty, vile envy of his authority, his love, his strength. I wasn't a champion of truth. I was an egoist who decided to assert himself by destroying everything that was precious to him. I was left alone in the huge, empty house. Friends turned their backs on me. Relatives stopped answering my calls. I became a leper. 6 months later, my mother had to be placed in a specialized care facility because she had become a danger to herself. Anna moved to another state, changed her phone number, and cut all ties. Before she left, she came to the house to pick up her things. We ran into each other in the hallway. She looked at me as if I were empty space and walked past. I got what I wanted. I became the king of ruins. I walked through rooms where every object screamed of past happiness, and I choked on my guilt. My truth turned out to be a radioactive substance that destroyed all life around it, leaving a scorched desert in its wake. I thought this was rock bottom, that it couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. The most terrible blow was yet to come. Chapter 5. The Truth About the Truth. 2 years passed. 2 years of silence, dust, and self-flagellation. I lived in the mausoleum house I myself had created. My mother was fading away in a care home, refusing to speak and barely reacting to the world around her. Anna, I had heard from distant relatives, had gotten married and was expecting a child, having built a new life on the rubble of the old, a life where I was permanently banned. I was serving my life sentence within the walls of this house, replaying the scene of the execution in my head every single day. I believed I knew the whole truth and was serving my deserved punishment for it. I was a fool. I didn't even know its shadow. The denouement came when the care home called to inform me that my mother had passed away, quietly in her sleep. I went to collect her belongings, a small box, a few old sweaters, a small icon, and a jewelry box with a tiny lock that I remembered from childhood. The lock mechanism had rusted, and I easily pried it open with a knife. Inside,
Under a stock of yellowed photographs lay a thick notebook, my mother's diary which she had kept in her youth. I sat on a bench in the dreary park near the care home and began to read. And the world that I had so painstakingly destroyed exploded before my eyes a second time, burying what was left of my sanity under the rubble. On the yellowed pages, filled with calligraphic script, was not a love story, but a chronicle of a nightmare. Victor Monroe, her fiancé, was not a passionate romantic, but a cruel, jealous tyrant. He controlled her every move, beat her for a stray glance at another man, humiliated and morally destroyed her. She wrote of fear, of bruises that had to be covered with makeup, of a desire to run away or die. Her parents were intimidated by his connections and influence. She was trapped. And my father, Samuel, was her only friend. The proper, bland Samuel, who saw her pain and desperation. He urged her to leave, promising to help, to protect her. But she was terrified. Victor had threatened that if she left him, he would cripple her and then kill both her and anyone who stood in his way. And then I reached the final entry. The date, May 16th, the day before her wedding to my father. Yesterday was the end and the beginning. Victor cornered me near my house. He was like a madman. He said he found out about Sam and that now he would kill me, but first he would make me beg for death. He dragged me into the park, towards the old ravine. I screamed, but no one heard. He pulled out a knife. And then Sam appeared. He had been looking for me, worried. He threw himself at Victor, trying to get the knife. All I remember is screaming, gasping, a struggle in the mud. And then it was quiet. Victor lay on the ground, not moving. The knife was in his chest. Sam was sitting next to him, covered in blood, staring at his hands as if he couldn't believe what he'd done. He didn't murder him. He was defending me. He saved my life at the cost of his own soul. We buried him there, in the ravine. And Sam said, "No one must ever know. Live, Helen, just live." And so I live, with this sacrament, with this sacrifice, with a love for the man who became both my savior and my eternal debtor. I sat on the bench, and the world around me ceased to exist. I couldn't breathe, my ears were ringing. My father, not a murderer, a hero. His silence at my trial was not an admission of guilt, but a final act of protection. He didn't defend himself so as not to reopen my mother's old wound, so as not to unload the horror she had endured onto Anna and me. He chose to take all the blame upon himself and die with the brand of a killer, just to preserve her fragile peace. Their entire life was not a lie, but a silent, heroic deed. They carried this secret together like a heavy cross, so that we, their children, could live in a bright and perfect world. And me? In my pride and righteous fury, I had burst into their sanctuary, trampled on their sacrifice, slandered a hero, and killed him for a second time. I hadn't destroyed a lie. I had destroyed the greatest truth of desperate love and self-sacrifice. I returned to the empty house. Now its silence has a new meaning. It is not just the silence of death, it is the deafening echo of a heroic act I did not understand, and a betrayal I did commit. I looked for a monster in my father to elevate myself, and I found a monster, just not in him. I find him every time I look in the mirror, and that is my eternal, unforgivable truth. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel and you'll hear even more captivating tales.